Well, good evening. Good Sunday evening. I'm Bob Graves, and they call me the Unconventional Pastor. And it's good to be back again with you this Sunday. I enjoy the chats that we have. And by the way, I really enjoyed last hour's chat with Greg Bray. I don't express enough appreciation for Greg. He's a very kind fellow, and I've really grown to like him a great deal. And I'm very happy with the fact that here we have a person who is, apparently down to his core, very much an atheist. And I'm down to my core, very much a theist. And yet we can be good friends and we can talk about issues and have differences of opinion and still enjoy each other's company. And I mean, really enjoy each other's company. I think he's a wonderful fellow. And I really enjoy doing that show with him. And I don't let him know that enough. I got to keep him on the edge, But anyway, I appreciate Greg very much. Tonight, I want to talk about something that is a topic I don't really care for that much, but I do get asked questions about it, and okay, I'll answer that. And but it's also a question which I find that although people ask me this question, they want to know answers to it. Many times when I give them my answer, they don't like the answers I give. But hey, I thought that it might be useful to talk about it. And that is that I want to talk about multi-axialism. And I want to talk about how that applies to concepts of economics and politics in terms of how I apply it and how I see that even as a person who is a Christian, a person who believes in Jesus and believes in as a Christian. And I find it kind of strange that we live in a culture where so many people are convinced that that the United States of America is a Christian nation. And I believe that a lot of people here are Christians, and we have a lot of, this nation is definitely influenced a great deal by many Christian values and many people who are Christians. But I sometimes I get the impression that some of these people want to invent a history that just didn't happen in order to try to preserve that. Now, certainly as a Christian, I would hope that I like the idea that I can live in an environment that is a Christian environment. And I would like to see that continue, of course. But at the same time, the way that I see some people trying to do that strikes me as both odd and unworkable, and also based upon a philosophy that strikes me as a very false philosophy. And so I find it, it's I guess I'm that stick in the eye that finds it a little difficult to go along. For one thing, I find that as a person, I believe that forms of government, forms of economy, are nothing other than systemic organized approaches, and that's fine. That's wonderful. That's great. I think that as a culture and as a society, we need to find a way of governing ourselves in ways that we just can't expect everybody to do everything they ought to do on their own. I think that sometimes we misread the intent from the Old Testament when it says, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. I don't think it was trying to talk about how this just caused the country to be just terribly immoral. I think it's really just talking about how it was disorganized. Everyone was doing what's right in their own eyes. There's a sense in which that's not necessarily wrong. It's just inefficient. It just isn't getting things done, and it's creating a mishmash. And if there was a mission or a purpose, it's certainly not going to get served that way. And so I think that's really what it's talking about. But in terms of the systems that we have now, think about it. Ancient Israel was at first a clan, and then it eventually became a country run by judges, and then it became a kingdom, and they only went through two kings. And by the time they got to their third king, that wasn't working for them so well, and it fell apart. 10 tribes just, they seceded. They said, hey, we're playing this game with you guys. It isn't going to work. And Israel and Judah become two separate nations, but they were kingdoms, run by a king. We've had in this world, we've had communist governments, we've had governments that are built around the economic concepts of socialism. We've had dictators, we've had kingdoms, we've had democracies, we've had republics. We've had a wide variety of different types of government. Personally, I see these things as neither good nor bad. Now, there's a lot of people who would want to argue with that, but I think that, there's no argument that can be made as to whether or not any of these are good or bad, because they're just ways of getting things done. And it's important to get some things done. And I think that also that the reason why things work and don't work oftentimes may have only a little bit to do with the kind of government or the kind of economy we have set up. And that all just determines the rules and the functions by which things work cooperatively. And of course, that limits it. But I think that the major factor in what gets things done in a country, in a society, in an economy, has more to do with the ethical nature of love and how a country and its people feel about each other, and the level of respect that they have. So a viewer comment here has also said, we very much enjoy seeing the relationship you and Greg have as an atheist and a theist. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it too, because it's certainly enriched my life. And so I'm very glad that you're finding it to be a similar experience for you too. Thanks. But back to this idea here. For example, I've grown up here in America. I like it here. I'm accustomed to how it works here. If we were to suddenly have a very different kind of government, I don't know that I'd like that. But I think the reason why I wouldn't like it is because I don't understand how other governments work. And I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to work this out. None of that, but I have a lot of hopes and dreams and goals that I have developed and acquired in a context where I was thinking that's what was going to happen. But I think what happens with some people is they forget that, we human beings are very, in some ways, very flexible. And I'm a person who does not believe that evil exists in any manner other than the way we evaluate things. The value of things is the value we give to them, the value we assign to them. As even the Apostle Paul said, I'm convinced that there's nothing that is in and of itself, evil. It's only the motives. In fact, I would even argue, and I'm going to argue this even a little bit later, that some of the economic and political philosophies that we champion as if this is a good and moral system and that's an immoral and evil system, that those ideas are ways, in my opinion, of often shirking personal responsibility for evil. The evil that happens in a government, the evil that happens in an economy, is the evil that people choose to do. And no matter what kind of government you have, no matter what kind of economy you have, there will be different arrangements and different opportunities for people to take advantage of certain things so that they're serving themselves and not others. But and so it'll be different in different kinds of government, just exactly what sort of abuses can take place. But there's no form of government in which abuses can't take place. People will do what they can get away with doing many times. And that when we try to think of a system as being proper and noble in and of itself, we then start to passively rely on the system to keep things good, when keeping things good is your job, not the system's job. The system is just merely a way of organizing it, keeping it runnable and operating. And I think that many times this is one of the ways that a nation can really slip into evil, is by thinking that the system we have is going to keep that from happening, when it doesn't. It's people. It's their heart, it's their love or their lack of it. And For example, I think that you know, I wouldn't want us to become an entirely socialistic country here. I don't understand that. I really don't think it would necessarily be the most efficient and best way of doing things. But I'll tell you one thing. Here's one reason why I'm not opposed to socialism. And I am opposed to socialism for the most part. But the one reason I'm not opposed to it is this: socialism is evil. It is not. Socialism is socialism. And that's all it is. If we had socialism here and we could all get on board and we could agree, okay, this is how we're going to do things, this is how we're going to own things, this is how we're going to cooperate as a people, and we had a good heart in doing that, I think it would work wonderfully. The way it shapes our lives, the kinds of things we end up doing, the sort of options that we have would be a very different set, no doubt. But life could be good under that. And the only thing that would make it miserable is if certain people decided to, from the positions that gives them, to take advantage of those positions and to put other people over a barrel and really push on them that way until a number of privileges come to them. And next thing you know, it falls apart. And I do think that every form of government falls apart. Every single form of government. They just fall apart in different ways. They are all strong in different ways. They're all weak in different ways. And the strength and the weak of them isn't really a strength or a weakness built into the particular systems they are. It's a strength or a weakness that we as people either rely on or take advantage of. And being a different system, there's different things to rely on, different things to take advantage of. And so, of course, the type of government we have changes that. But I think that we can have a far more intelligent concept of what it means to be a believer in Jesus and a citizen of the United States. If we find a way of divorcing a necessary connection between the particular kind of government that we have and whether or not we're a Christian nation, as it were, or whatever that would even really mean. I don't think we have to be Democrats or Republicans or libertarians or anything of that sort to be a good nation. And I don't think that being any of those things would ever guarantee that we're just going to be a good nation. And I don't think that God even really cares in some ways whether we structure ourselves this way or structure ourselves that way. I think that if we love each other and deal with whatever method we use to organize things in a way that where we care about one another as people, I think that that's wonderful and that's good enough. And I remember talking to one person who was very much into capitalism, and they're talking about the wealth of nations and how it's demonstrated how certain ways of doing things make nations wealthy, and they're arguing about this, and I'm thinking, well, I understand that for a while that really worked that way. I don't know that we all need to be this wealthy. What do we need to be this wealthy for? If we have our needs met, particularly if we all have our needs met, why do we have to be wealthy? I don't understand that as a goal. It doesn't make sense to me that is a worthwhile goal. Well, then you have something to really sustain yourself through well, why don't we just have a system that doesn't require the need to sustain yourself through all of the risks that are a part of capitalism? It sounds to me like it's the answer to its own problem, or trying to be. But then again, you take a look at it with the wealth of nations. How wealthy are the nations these days that have been capitalist? They're all in deep deficit and debt. Where's their wealth? The wealth is in the hands of the bankers and a few capitalists, and everyone else is struggling, including the governments, to make ends meet. I get a feeling that capitalism somewhere along the line took a bait and switch and stopped being valid capitalism, and that it started being a system whereby some of the ways in which that kind of system had its own built-in weaknesses, things people could take advantage of, they've been taken advantage of. And because it's capitalism, we justify it. Well, that's my right as a business owner. That's my right as an investor. And I can understand and appreciate some of those attitudes. But at the same time, the whole idea that we're living a life based on, well, that's my right. I got to be honest with you, that strikes me as in and of itself a little bit off center um, from where life would be. I mean, I think about, for example, the level of unemployment we have. I have a son who he's laid off right now. He's been going through some tough stuff lately with the way that's working, and and as I was chatting with him about it, you know, there was a time. I'm not suggesting we go back to it. I don't think it was the best of times, just a different time. But there was a time when, you know, most Americans lived in like a homestead. Property taxes were low enough that a person who needed to survive could, you know, work their land, take care of the crops, you know, make sure that the sheep and the goats and the cows or whatever were well taken care of. And if you didn't have a job, as it were, you were still busy all day. There were things to do, and they met your needs, and you were not dependent upon other people. But now we've created a system whereby we're trying to make all of these opportunities to move ahead and advance and become, you know, a large middle class and all this. And I'm not saying that these aren't things that can be good or beneficial, but we don't want to face the fact that, you know, one of the problems we have here is this: when unemployment goes down, when jobs are just not there, and well-abled people want to have a job, and there just aren't enough job for all the people who are well able to have them, these people don't have anything else to fall back on. If they don't have their unemployment, you know, how are they going to pay the rent? How are they going to pay the mortgage? How are they going to pay the life insurance? How are they going to buy the groceries? How are they going to take care of the kids? How are they going to keep things moving forward? They are totally dependent upon a system that doesn't have built into it the kind of opportunities that can be genuinely given to everybody, so that there's a sense in which, when a capitalist society is meeting the needs of the capitalists, but it's not really a good fit for the culture itself, then why do we really even need it? Now, I'm not against capitalism. I don't think capitalism is evil. I don't think it's wrong. I'm just saying it is what it is. But, you know, in some ways, I think that the opportunities to take advantage of it have been way too overblown. And we need to realize that that this is part of the cost that we pay. That we end up with the unemployment that can go this way. And many times, the very things we do to try to make sure that we can keep jobs going are things that don't really help. I was listening to some people earlier today who were talking about the economy and, you know, what we need to keep investments going. And some of the corporations are doing very well, but they're still not investing the money. And well, there's a good reason why they're not investing the money. There's nothing to invest it in right now that looks like it's going to have a decent return, because, well, you know, we have such a small, shrinking middle class. There aren't really consumers out there who can drive the needs for those investments. And there's a sense in which I think that the constant drifting of money upwards and the shrinking middle class and the lack of trying to truly develop the lower class into a better lifestyle has resulted in shooting ourselves in the foot, all because, well, that's the right thing to do and what we have a right to do. But when it comes down to it, the solutions and the ideas and the problems that we're having, what bothers me as a Christian is that we now try to come to these ideas as if there is a Christian way of looking at it. And I want to argue there is no Christian way of looking at it. There's just a Christian way of behaving while looking at it. And while we look at it, I suggest something I call multi-axialism. For example, by multi-axialism, here's what I mean. I think we should look at human problems from every possible point of view. And I think we should love the strengths of every single possible point of view, and also spend some time hating the weaknesses of every possible point of view, and realize that in the end, all we have are a variety of points of view with various strengths and weaknesses, and we need to see what's going to have a goodness of fit for the particular situation, but without any necessary need to demonize or champion any one particular idea, other than, will it work? Will it meet the needs? Not some, well, I believe it will and I believe it won't. I'm not concerned about what we believe. I want to know what can do these things, what can solve our problems. And then when it comes to this multi-axialism, when it deals with politics, for example, some people sometimes ask me if I'm a libertarian or if I'm a conservative or if I'm a liberal. And I find that most people who are conservatives think I'm a liberal. Most people who are liberal think that I'm a little too conservative. Uh, and some of them think, oh, well, you're a libertarian. You sound like a libertarian. And I think that probably I do sound more like a libertarian, but I'm not a libertarian. People who are real libertarians, when they hear me talk, they agree with some of the things I'm saying, but they find other things. Well, I don't like that. Uh, my answer basically sometimes I'm post-political. You see, because here's the way I understand it. I really believe that reality is multifaceted. I believe that what reality is doing is something we don't necessarily uh, have a grasp of. And I don't know that we necessarily can have a grasp of it. And I don't know that we need to have a grasp of it. We just need to have a sufficient grasp of it that it is relatively workable. And that's why I think we need to be multi-axial. We need to look at things from a wide variety of different angles, appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of looking at it in that way, and realize something else. Every way of looking at human problems, every way of looking at every governmental problem, every way of looking at every social problem, every economic problem is nothing other than a lens that helps us organize it in a particular way. Reality isn't the way we organize it. Organize it merely helps us to understand it and comprehend it in a particular way. And I think that most human beings make a serious and grievous error. They think that the ways that we organize our perception to understand reality is reality. And it never is. It's just a representation of it put into a systematic way of understanding it that is like a lens that helps us to see it. It's like reality is so complex that all we see is a fog. So I put on these liberal glasses. And when I have these liberal glasses on, I can now see the world through a liberal lens. And I can see problems and define them liberally. And I can come up with solutions that are liberal solutions. And it all makes wonderful sense to me. But I forget. Well, the only reason why I understand it this way, and the only reason these solutions make sense to me, is because I'm using a liberal lens. I'm not really looking at reality. I'm looking at reality as it is organized for me by this lens. But it's the same thing if I was a conservative. I put on conservative glasses and I look at the world as a conservative. And as I do that faithfully, I understand these problems in terms of a conservative point of view. And I look at their solutions and I understand those solutions in a conservative point of view. And next thing you know, I think I understand the world and its problems and its solutions. And I forget. No, I don't. I'm not looking at reality. I'm looking at reality through a conservative lens. And duh, of course it's going to make sense to me as a conservative. Of course the solutions I come up with are going to make sense to me. And of course, if I'm going to forget that I'm not looking at reality, but rather I'm looking through a lens, I'm going to think, well, oh my God, those liberals, they're going to ruin it all for us, you know? And the same thing's true if I'm a liberal and looking through the liberal lens or a libertarian lens, you know? So what we do is we come at reality and we need, as a society and as a culture, to organize things. We need to organize our economy. We need to organize our governments. We need to organize our laws. We need to organize our societies. We need to organize ourselves. We need to organize our business. We have to come at life making certain decisions and putting things together in a way that works. The problem is every way of making something work has strengths, and every way of making things work has weaknesses. And it's best if we have a way of keeping a balance between various systems, being rather eclectic, being multi-axial, and approaching it in all of these various different ways. And the biggest reason for this is if you think the world is the way that you are seeing it, rather than thinking that the way you are seeing it is merely your own individual way of organizing it, you have no clue how you are violating reality. Nobody has the ability to make sense of reality as it is. We all have to organize it in a way that we can systemically put it together. This is another reason why I suggest being multi-axial. When you're multi-axial, you really don't have a point of view. You have a number of points of view that you appreciate, and they create for you certain conundrums you have no desire or intention to ever resolve. You don't need to resolve them. You can see how I see how this would be understood liberally and resolved liberally, and I see how this could be understood and resolved conservatively, and I can see how this could be understood and resolved, socially, or as a fascist, or as a dictator, or as a king, And bottom line is this: do you care about people? Do you care about needs? Do you care about a culture and a society? And you're interested in what's really going to work? If you're really interested in that, it seems to me that we would be far more interested in appreciating the various weaknesses and strengths of a wide variety of approaches. I guarantee you those approaches would not have come into existence had they not made sense to someone from their point of view. Labor. They know what life is like from the standpoint of being in labor. And they have some very important things to say. Management, they also look at the economy and the problems of life from their standpoint. And they have something to say. The people who are in labor, who are not necessarily making some of the decisions, don't necessarily have the ability to appreciate the decisions that management has to make. And the people who are in management don't always have an appreciation for the impact their decisions have on the people who are going to do the labor, or the fact that people are worthy of their due. And very often, each party seems to think of themselves as worth far more of the piece of the pie that they all create together than any of them are really worthy of. And as it ends up in any particular system, the one who actually has possession of the cash is the one who usually ends up having the advantage. So it doesn't always work out well or honestly or fairly. So in a sense here, what I'm saying is this, that as Christians, I don't think we need to have a loyalty to a particular political party. I don't think we need to have a loyalty to a particular kind of government. I don't think that these are the issues that even really matter to God, nor do I think that they're the issues that really even solve our secular problems. I think we need to be far more broad in our thinking. I think we need to consider things from far more points of view and take each of those points of view seriously and with great respect. I think that if you're looking at an issue and you can't understand and appreciate why conservatives see it the way they do, you're not really trying hard enough. If you can't understand why liberals see it the way they do and appreciate the strengths of what they see, you're not trying hard enough. And if you can't appreciate even, say, the libertarian point of view, these are the three major points of view that tend to get expressed in our country. The problem is what happens is each of these groups of people adopt a particular philosophical lens, like rose-colored glasses, and they refuse to see the world through anything through this lens that they trust. And it is for them nothing more than a security blanket. It is indeed a form of insecurity. To fail to be multi-axial is, in my opinion, a failure to really trust life, a failure to really trust each other, a failure to really trust myself, a failure to really believe we really can do it. We have the gifts, we have the skills, we have the abilities, we have the research. We just don't have the cooperation. We have too much fussing and fighting and trying to champion our particular rose-colored glasses, which is stupid. It's idiotic when you come to think about it. You want to protect a lens? I'm telling you something. The problems of this world take place in this world. The problems of people take place in their lives. They don't take place in our lenses. Now, it's true. We can't understand or make sense or comprehend these issues in any depth unless we use lenses of sorts. But you know what? I think we need to use multiple lenses. We need to look at it in several ways. You know, when you go to a doctor who's a competent doctor and he's trying to diagnose what a particular problem might be, he's going to do a number of tests. And each of these tests are a different way of viewing into the body and its biochemistry and its blood and its tissue, and its temperature and various other dynamics that are going on. Each of these tests try to reveal different aspects, and it's through the comparison of all of these things that a competent doctor can figure out, here's your problem. Now, I remember when I first came down with a disease called sarcoidosis. It's a permanent disease. Once you have it, you always have it for life. I came down with sarcoidosis back in 1988, somewhere around there. And for me, it presented itself in a very polyarthritic pattern. My legs were swelling up and my ankles were swelling up, and I got to the point where I couldn't walk, and I was having other issues, and nobody knew what was going on. And I was at the doctor's office, and they couldn't figure it out. And I was in there week after week, and things going on, and they'd try a few tests, and finally, I ended up in the hospital. And I was in there for like a week, a battery of tests, and I can remember the day that I was going to a medical group that time. There were several doctors involved there, and sometimes they would trade off who was dealing with what patient. One would be, his day off or on vacation, stuff like that. And I think it was a Dr. Harris. One day he walks into my hospital room, and in fact, he looked like a little kid. It was kind of funny. He said, "I got it figured out." And he seemed so proud of himself. And he said, "It's sarcoidosis." And I'd never heard the word before. What are you saying? He said, "We just have to do a biopsy too." And then they did they cut in they look in a gland in there, and they look for these certain things called granulomas. I won't go into all the details. And they did the biopsy, and they find the granulomas, and they go, "That's it." They confirmed the diagnosis. And then we knew how to medicate it. We knew how to deal with it. We knew how to bring things under control. And today I can say I'm normal, but you all know better. But you see, it took for these doctors to find out what was really going on inside of me. A variety of ways of looking at the problem, a variety of tests that gave them different kinds of insights into what's going on. Because I guarantee you, what was going on inside of my body was not necessarily according to various different theories of illness, and it was going on according to the biology going on in my body. And all of these theories of illness and these tests and things they do are merely different ways that medical doctors have discovered that give them a view as to what's going on. And many of them are very differential. By that, I mean, they can't really see what they're looking at. They see things that are articulated or are correlated with issues that are going on, and that tell them what must be going on in light of other things they can see that are going on. Complicated stuff, nonetheless. But the point being this, it takes a multi-axial approach sometimes to deal with these issues. And what have you. And without that, you're just not going to take a look at it. And I think that the same thing is true in our lives. But what do? We rally around, and I think out of insecurity, or perhaps out of a lack of trust in ourselves, or a lack of a respect for the variations that we all come in. We try to, and also I think sometimes we latch into our parties because there's strength in numbers. It's a lot easier to get everybody to vote as a group and get something through than to try to actually spend time persuading people one at a time. But it's an artificial. We've turned it down into almost as if there's only two ways of looking at life, and we got to vote on which one, and which one seems to be able to win out. And basically what happens is we vote a party into power because we're sick and tired of the other one. And then they get into power, and pretty soon we get sick and tired of them, and we vote the other one into power. And then we get sick and tired of them, and we vote. And what are we doing? We're playing a tug of war between lenses, and we're not even really dealing with the issues of the problem. And we've got other viewer comments here. Moral absolutes is the most important thing in the world. If it's wrong to torture, molest, kill, etc., then it's wrong to do that at all time and in all situations, no exception. Without moral absolutes, then people can justify any and every evil, and moral become relative. I can appreciate what you're saying. I do have a similar but a very different point of view in terms of that. I do believe in absolute morality, but I also believe no human being has a clue what absolute morality is. We only have a relative grasp of it, and therefore an honest consideration of the relativity of the morality in terms of trying to grasp the absolutes is the best we can do. The moment we think we're on the absolutes, we have stuck ourselves in a fixed way we don't realize is really just a relative way. So that absolutism, in my opinion, gets practiced with a relativity that is perceived as absolute instead of a recognition of an absolute that is ungraspable, and a relativity that seeks to grasp that absolute as best we can based on the point of view from which we're approaching it, because it is somewhat beyond us. So in fact, I would believe that a responsible relativity can't exist unless it's really based upon the foundation of an absolute in which it's relative to. Um, so I don't know if that made any sense to you, but I can understand that. I do believe, though, that there are some things that are fundamentally so. We just when it comes down to expressing them in specifics, it's not always as easy. But I do like what you're having to say. I would agree with you that in terms of some of the values you're expressing here, I would share them with you. I think that torture is absolutely unacceptable. And I think that even if there's things that torture might give you, I think you need to find a better way of getting those things if you really need them. And I would also say that any nation that feels that it has to torture its enemies has to reconsider the kinds of things it's doing that create the kind of enemies you could have that couldn't tell you the information you want to know unless they are tortured. I think we need to start taking a look at what we're doing to create an enemy that intense. There's something wrong going on there. So I would see that as a wrong that's operating on many, many levels. I agree with you, though, that I'm very much opposed to the concept of torture. Um, the molest killing, in some ways I can even empathize with the Zeitgeist movement and their concept of all this, how we should really just refuse to serve in that kind of that kind of endeavor. I have mixed feelings about that. I think that given the immaturity of the world, that unfortunately we're going to need an army. I say unfortunate because I think it's stupid. I think it's insane. I don't think we understand or appreciate the alternatives, but it is insane. There's something we're not getting here, and we're not getting it wide enough yet. And we need to be working towards that, because this is silly. This is crazy. It's insane. Anyway, but thanks for your comment. I appreciate it. I do believe in an absolutism, but I believe that we as human beings can never have anything but a relative grasp of the absolutes. Viewer comment. The Old Testament shows us what happens when people don't have moral absolutes. Sounds like the same person, perhaps. They commit atrocities and think they're justified in committing them. People ought to learn to not repeat the evil deeds and mistakes of their predecessors. I again here, I'm not so sure that. I mean, that sounds interesting, but good luck doing that. I don't think that's how we get away from evil. I think that the way to get away from evil is to stop even thinking about it. We need to kind of start adopting a certain level of naivete, I think, and realize that love your enemy, love your neighbor, look for the win-win, seek to resolve things so that they are reconciled, not overcome. I don't want to overcome my enemy. I don't want to protect myself against my enemy. I want to win my enemy over so that they're no longer enemies. And I think that the Old Testament approached these things from a legal standpoint. And I think that legal standpoint makes sense on a very shallow level, but that it bypasses the real problems of the heart. And that I see the real root of these evils is not in failing to understand the mistakes of the past. You don't need to understand the mistakes of the past to know what it means to love your enemy, to love your neighbor. You need to know your neighbor. You need to care about them. You need to realize that the things you do will impact them now, today, and from the moment you make a decision and act on it and that day forward. And I think that if you focus more on that, we can solve a lot of this. It's a matter of the heart. It's a matter of love. I think that we're not yet ready to trust love as a real answer. And I don't think, I think it would be too naive to just say, okay, I'm going to pretend we're all loving because we're not. You're going to open yourself up. Jesus said, be harmless as be wise as wolves and harmless as doves. He realized this ain't going to be easy, and we're not going to cure the world by tomorrow, unfortunately. But thank you for the comment, and it resonates with me, but I can't quite agree with it. But I think that I even appreciate very much what it is you're aiming at, what it is you'd like this to accomplish, and I think it's a very useful and very very noble desire and a very wonderful goal. I would just suggest that we need to find some way that relates more to the love in the moment. In order to achieve that. Another comment here. Nice way to view our own realities versus the way things really are. Well, thank you. Thank you. In fact, this is the beauty of what I call the multi-axial approach. Now, some people even ask me, how did you ever come across this multi-axial concept? Well, I don't know. It just kind of evolved for me naturally. I grew up in a home where I had two brilliant parents. Uh, they were both highly intelligent. They lacked empathy, at least the right sort. I'd have to say that my childhood was in many ways very emotionally abusive and very very oh, I'm looking for a word. It destroyed me in many ways, but nonetheless, there was a high level of intellectual activity, both in the family and in the extended family. Some connections with some rather prominent and amazing thinkers. My dad was a very brilliant fellow. Had a number of inventions to his credit. Worked with IBM. He began his career as a young engineer coming out of college, already attracting the attention of people like Albert Einstein, who actually took him under his wing for a while, and they worked with each other. A lot of brilliant people going on, and this and that. And I had uncles who were involved in all sorts of things. I think, if I recall correct, I think that at the time that I was born, I had an uncle who was also research director of the National Republican Committee, and people, just in places and working with it. So in this, but I saw coming from my own family, all these different points of view that struck me as being ineffective and harsh, and yet well argued and very different. We had very adamant Democrats, very adamant Republicans, and we even had some people in the family who became the authors of some of the materials used by the Libertarian Party. People who were friends with the objectivist movements, and things that are going on there, and hearing all of these different philosophies and these attitudes, well articulated and well argued and well presented by all these different people, and yet very different. And I didn't see any of them as really caring, to be honest with you. Maybe that was just my own jaded view. It was the only, the experience. But I was seeing, nonetheless, how all of these different points of view made sense. And so as I'm growing up, I'm finding myself discovering that everybody's looking at the world in their own way and through their own eyes and their own lenses, and each of them possess a certain level of coherence. And then as I became a teenager, I became aware of what I found fascinating, all these optical illusions. You look at it and well, what is that? Is that a this or is it that? And I enjoy looking at a wide variety of different optical illusions. And it just struck me one day that this is reality. This is the way reality is. Reality is so complex, and we only see some aspects of it that take our notice, that it's possible for reality to genuinely and honestly appear to us based on the lens we use to look at it to be this way. And that's what it looks like. And every test you give it, that's what it is, And then but it's also possible to look at it another way. I think I got to the point where I began to see that each of these different points of view that I had around me were in and of themselves internally coherent. These people were very much given to it and given a great considerable amount of thought to their ideas, and yet they didn't share the same ideas. And then later in life, when I went back to college, I've been there a couple of times. I went back to college, got a degree in human development. In the school where I went to get it, we had it was a multidisciplinary curriculum there, where for them, human development is defined a little differently in different schools that give a degree in it. But there it was understood as in human development, there it was a degree in studying all of the different humanitarian lenses that we use to understand the human being's challenges from cradle to grave, and the various ways that we come at those problems and challenges and try to make sense of them. So instead of studying anthropology, we studied the anthropological lens and how an anthropologist looks at human challenges and human history and human problems, and therefore offers its solutions. We looked at sociology, not to become sociologists, but to understand how sociologists will look at groups and subgroups and interactions between various sectors of a culture, and how they interact with each other and work, and how the lenses used to understand those kinds of issues and problems help to define what they are and look at the solutions. And we studied psychology to study its lens. And so basically what we did, we looked at all the different anthropology, psychology, sociology, and all these different humanities, political science, as different ways that human beings organize the problems of life and the challenges of human development, and how they then therefore look at all of these different things. So it was a multidisciplinary degree, and it was in there that I said, "Well, yes, 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 yes. This is what I've been coming to," and it finally got me to the point where I then deliberately sought to take a look at a wide variety of issues in as many different possible ways of looking at it, learning to love each of those ideas, learning to hate each of those ideas, until finally I could see strengths and weaknesses in all of them, and feel that, well, which one do you want to work with? It depends on which one would meet the need in the current context. And sometimes that depends on what people are ready for, what they can do, what they will not do, how cooperative they will be, how cooperative they won't be, and various things like that. And so that was basically the way that I began to see this multi-axialism. And it finally led me to the point that, well, none of these lenses are valid or invalid. They're just different ways of seeing things. And they each offer us a different set of highlights and a certain set of features that are more prominent to be able to understand and study and think about from that lens. And that to be a well-rounded person, you have to develop as many of these lenses as you can and appreciate the strengths and weaknesses in each of them. And so that's basically how I got there. And so it made me a person who couldn't really necessarily fit in any one particular camp easily, but it was basically that. But anyhow, as I try to wrap this up in the idea that I'm talking about tonight, I think that as a person who follows Christ, that I'm interested in seeking with the relationship that I have with God, the relationship that I have with other people, as being something that needs to be flexible and multifaceted and workable in all of these different arrangements. And that therefore, consequently, I don't really need to necessarily champion one approach over another. I just need to be honest about whether or not this kind of approach could work with these people, given the way their attitudes are and the way they work. Some people can work with a particular solution. Other people would have to work with a different solution. Sometimes it's the limits that exist in them and that have nothing to do with the limits or the strengths of the particular systems or solutions you choose. And to be able to be flexible enough to work with all of these helped me to actually, I think, find a way of being more productive, more fruitful, and even discussing things with people and finding more practical approaches to various different situations. I'd also have to say this, that it was that multi-axial approach that radically altered my own life. It took me from a time when I was very dysfunctional to actually being able to manage life in a way where I love living. I like my life. I like what I'm doing. I like how well I'm doing. I like how I experience it. I like how I can contribute to it. I like other people. I like what they're doing. I found myself coming at a lot of this with a far more positive attitude and a far more workable way of dealing with it, and less stress, much more peace, easygoing, less of an agenda. more of an openness to who people are and what they need, and giving them the freedom to be very different people, where some people might need things in one kind of a systemic way and other people might need things in another systemic way. And that's fine. It's okay. These other issues are really in some ways amoral and irrelevant. It's whether or not we are loving people, loving ourselves, and dealing with each other in a manner that gives to people the dignity and the opportunity of their lives to become all that they can be as well, and in whatever that might mean to them. Well, anyway, that's pretty much all the time we have tonight. Thank you for on the Super Bowl Sunday giving me the opportunity to rant and rave with you. Thank you so much for your questions and your views. And as always, whatever I have to share with you, it's just my opinion. It's worth nothing more than something to think about. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's perfectly fine. I'm so glad you gave me the opportunity to just share these ideas with you anyway. So this is Bob Greaves, the Unconventional Pastor. I'll see you on Wednesday.